Albert Einstein, a name synonymous with genius and discovery. But did you know that his journey to becoming one of the greatest minds in history wasn't as simple as it seems? Born in a small town in Germany, Einstein faced struggles with traditional schooling, yet his curiosity and love for science set him on a path that would change the world forever. In this story, we'll explore the challenges, breakthroughs, and unique moments that made Albert Einstein an icon of intellect. Let's dive into the life of the man who proved that imagination is more important than knowledge. A curious mind. Albert Einstein was not born a genius in the way people might imagine. He was not a child prodigy who spoke fluently before his first birthday, nor did he solve complex mathematical problems before he could walk. In fact, quite the opposite was true. He was a quiet child, slow to speak, and often lost in his thoughts. His parents, Hermann and Pauline Einstein, even feared something might be wrong with him. But beneath that silence lay a mind that never stopped wondering, never stopped questioning, and never accepted things as they were without trying to understand why. A silent observer, Albert was born on March 14, 1879, in the small city of Ulm, in the Kingdom of Württemberg, Germany. His father, Hermann Einstein, was an engineer and businessman, while his mother, Pauline, was a well-educated woman who had a deep love for music and culture. From an early age, Albert showed signs of being different. He did not speak much as a toddler, and when he finally did begin to talk, he was known for repeating sentences to himself softly before saying them aloud. This behavior led his family to call him der Deperte, meaning the dopey one. Despite his delayed speech, Albert was an unusually observant child. While other children played games or ran through the streets, he would sit for hours, staring at objects, watching how they moved, and trying to understand them. He was fascinated by small details, how light reflected off a glass of water, how steam rose from a kettle, how raindrops gathered on a window pane. But one particular incident from his childhood stood out and would remain with him for the rest of his life. The mystery of the compass. When Albert was 5 years old, he fell ill and was confined to bed for several days. To keep him entertained, his father gave him a small pocket compass to play with. At first, Albert simply turned it around in his hands, watching how the needle moved. But then, something strange caught his attention. The needle always pointed in the same direction, no matter which way he turned the compass. This was a revelation for young Albert. He understood that something invisible was acting upon the needle, something mysterious and unseen. It was not being pushed or pulled by anything he could see, yet it moved with purpose. He later described this moment as one of the most profound experiences of his childhood. It was his first encounter with the idea that there were hidden forces in the universe, forces that could not be seen but had a deep and undeniable effect on the physical world. This simple pocket compass ignited his lifelong fascination with physics, with understanding the fundamental laws that governed the universe. It was a small glimpse into the mysteries that he would spend his entire life trying to unravel. A different kind of student. When Albert began attending school, it quickly became clear that he did not fit into the traditional education system. The schools of late 19th century Germany were rigid and focused heavily on memorization and strict discipline. Teachers expected students to absorb information without question, to recite lessons word for word, and to obey without hesitation. But Albert was not that kind of student. He disliked the structure of school, finding it boring and uninspiring. He refused to simply accept information as truth. He wanted to understand why things were the way they were. If a teacher explained a scientific principle, Albert would not be satisfied until he could picture it in his mind and make sense of it. This often put him at odds with his teachers, many of whom found him to be a stubborn and rebellious student. One famous incident occurred when a teacher, frustrated with his constant questioning, told him, "You will never amount to anything." Albert simply shrugged and continued to learn in his own way. He was not interested in memorizing facts. He wanted to explore ideas. A world of books and numbers. Despite his troubles at school, Albert had an insatiable thirst for knowledge. Fortunately, he found guidance from two important figures in his early life: his uncle, Jacob Einstein, and a family friend, Max Talmud. Jacob Einstein was an engineer who introduced young Albert to algebra and mechanical devices. He explained mathematical concepts in a way that made them exciting rather than tedious. Under his uncle's guidance, Albert began to see math not as a list of rules to memorize, but as a language that described how the universe worked. Max Talmud, a medical student who often visited the Einstein home, took on the role of a mentor. He introduced Albert to books on philosophy, mathematics, and science, books that were far beyond what most children his age were reading. One of the books that fascinated Einstein the most was a popular book on natural science by Aaron Bernstein, which described the wonders of physics in an engaging way. By the age of 12, Albert had taught himself Euclidean geometry, solving complex problems for fun. He was captivated by the logical structure of mathematics, the way it provided certainty in a world full of questions. Soon, he moved on to calculus, teaching himself concepts that most students wouldn't encounter until much later in their education. Defying expectations. Albert's defiance of traditional education reached a breaking point when he was a teenager. He was enrolled at the Luitpold Gymnasium, a strict and disciplined school in Munich, but he despised the rigid system. He found it suffocating and uninspiring. The pressure to conform, the emphasis on memorization, and the lack of creative freedom all made him feel like an outsider. At the age of 15, Albert made a bold decision. He left school without graduating. His family had moved to Italy, and he took the opportunity to join them, escaping the suffocating German education system. While this could have been the end of his academic journey, Albert had other plans. Instead of giving up on education, he decided to pursue it in his own way. He applied to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich, a school known for its more progressive approach to learning. Although he initially failed the entrance exam due to his struggles in non-mathematical subjects, he did not let this setback discourage him. He spent a year studying on his own, preparing himself, and eventually gained admission. This moment marked a turning point in Einstein's life. It was the beginning of his journey toward becoming one of the greatest minds in history. He had defied the rigid school system, followed his curiosity, and carved his own path, a path that would eventually lead to the most groundbreaking discoveries in science, a mind that never stopped wondering. Albert Einstein's childhood was not marked by the kind of brilliance that people might expect. He was not a prodigy in the traditional sense, but he was something far more important: a thinker, a questioner, a dreamer. From the moment he held that small compass in his hands, he knew that the world was filled with mysteries waiting to be uncovered. His struggles in school, his defiance of rigid education, and his relentless curiosity all shaped the man he would become. He was not content with the answers given to him. He wanted to find his own. And in doing so, he would change the way humanity understood the universe. This was only the beginning of Albert Einstein's journey. The boy who questioned everything would grow into the man who redefined time and space. Chapter 2: The Power of Imagination. A mind that wandered beyond the classroom. The rigid walls of the Luitpold Gymnasium felt like a prison to young Albert Einstein. The strict German education system was built on discipline, obedience, and memorization, but none of that suited him. He was expected to sit quietly at his desk, listen, and repeat facts without question. But Albert was never one to accept things as they were. His mind constantly wandered, escaping the monotony of the classroom and venturing into places no one else could see. During a Latin lesson, while his classmates recited conjugations in unison, Albert stared out the window. His mind was elsewhere, soaring through the stars, imagining the nature of time itself. Einstein, the teacher's voice snapped him back to reality. "Are you paying attention?" Albert hesitated. "Yes, Herr Professor," he said, but the teacher could tell he had been daydreaming again. "Your mind is always somewhere else," the teacher sighed. "You will never amount to anything if you do not learn discipline." Albert lowered his eyes, but inside he felt something different. He didn't believe in blind discipline. He believed in curiosity. And if that made him different, so be it. The magic of thought experiments. When Albert was around 12 years old, he began conducting what he later called Gedankenexperiments, thought experiments. These were experiments he performed entirely in his mind, imagining situations that no one had ever considered before. One day, while walking home from school, he had a question that would change his life. What would it be like to ride on a beam of light? He closed his eyes and imagined it. If he could travel at the speed of light, what would he see? Would everything around him freeze? Would time stop? The more he thought about it, the more fascinating the question became. No one had ever asked such a thing before. While other children played in the streets, Albert sat in his room, lost in thought. He imagined the universe as a giant puzzle, one that he desperately wanted to solve. His parents didn't always understand his obsession, but they supported him. His mother, Pauline, encouraged his love for music, believing it would help his mind relax. His father, Hermann, and his uncle Jakob, who were both engineers, gave him science books and introduced him to complex ideas in mathematics and physics. A new world of numbers and ideas. One evening, Albert's uncle Jakob visited and handed him a book. "This is for you," he said. "A small challenge for your mind." Albert opened the book and saw that it was filled with problems in algebra. At first, he was intimidated, but then something clicked. Algebra is like a puzzle, his uncle explained. You replace numbers with symbols and solve the problem step by step, just like a detective solving a mystery. Albert was fascinated. He spent hours working through the problems, finding joy in solving each one. Soon he realized that mathematics wasn't just about numbers, it was about patterns, relationships, and understanding the hidden order of the universe. At the same time, a family friend, Max Talmud, introduced him to a book on natural science. Albert devoured it, absorbing ideas about light, energy, and motion. He realized that the universe was governed by invisible laws, and he wanted to understand them all. A clash with authority. Einstein's growing curiosity made him restless. He began questioning not just scientific principles, but the very structure of education itself. One day in class, his physics teacher explained Newton's laws of motion. Albert raised his hand. But how do we know space and time are absolute? What if time changes depending on how fast we move? The teacher frowned. That is nonsense, Einstein. Time is constant. But what if it's not? Albert persisted. The teacher sighed. If you keep questioning everything, you will never succeed. This was a lesson Albert refused to accept. He did not believe that learning meant memorizing rules. He believed it meant challenging them. His refusal to conform led to many clashes with his teachers. One even told him, "Einstein, your presence in my class destroys the respect students have for me." Albert realized that traditional education was not designed for someone like him. It crushed curiosity rather than encouraging it. He knew he had to find his own path, Germany. At the age of 15, Albert's frustration with school reached its peak. Around the same time, his father's business was struggling, and the Einstein family decided to move to Italy for a fresh start. Albert saw an opportunity. He hated his school in Munich and wanted to leave. So, in a bold move, he convinced his parents to let him drop out. This was almost unheard of at the time. Leaving school without a diploma was a risky decision. But Albert was certain that he could learn more by studying on his own than by sitting in a rigid classroom. In Italy, he spent his days reading books on physics and mathematics. He was fascinated by the works of great scientists like Maxwell, Faraday, and Newton. He studied calculus on his own and mastered it before most students his age even encountered it. But there was a problem. If he wanted to attend university, he needed a formal education. He couldn't just rely on his self-learning. A second chance in Switzerland. Determined to continue his studies, Albert applied to the prestigious Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich. However, he failed the entrance exam, not in math or physics, but in language, history, and other subjects he had neglected. Rather than giving up, he took a different route. He enrolled in a Swiss school in Aarau to complete his education and prepare for another attempt. This school was different. It encouraged independent thinking and creativity. Albert thrived in this new environment, and within a year, he successfully passed the entrance exam for the Polytechnic. Finally, at the age of 17, he had found a place where his mind could roam freely. He was now on the path to becoming a scientist. Imagination overcomes all. Albert Einstein's early life was defined by his imagination. While others followed rules, he questioned them. While teachers demanded obedience, he sought understanding. And while the world tried to confine him within the rigid walls of education, his mind soared beyond those walls, exploring the mysteries of space, time, and light. The power of imagination had set him apart, and it would continue to guide him on his journey to revolutionizing science. This was just the beginning. The young boy who once imagined riding a beam of light would soon unlock the secrets of the universe itself. Chapter 3. A New Beginning in Zurich. In the autumn of 1896, Albert Einstein arrived in Zurich to begin his studies at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic, now ETH Zurich. The city was alive with intellectual energy. Students from all over Europe came to study science, engineering, and mathematics. It was a fresh start, free from the oppressive discipline of the German school system. Here, Albert hoped his mind would finally be allowed to roam freely. He had worked hard to get here, overcoming the setbacks of his early education. But as he soon discovered, the road to becoming a physicist would not be easy. At the Polytechnic, Einstein was surrounded by brilliant minds, but his rebellious nature did not change. He found many of the lectures uninspiring and often skipped classes. Instead of attending lectures, he spent hours in the library, reading advanced physics books that were not even part of the curriculum. His professors noticed his unconventional approach. One of them, Professor Heinrich Weber, grew frustrated with Albert's attitude. Einstein, Weber said one day after class, "You are intelligent, but you do not respect the system. If you continue like this, you will find it difficult to get anywhere in life." Albert smiled politely, but said nothing. He did not believe in blindly following the system. He wanted to learn, but on his own terms. His defiance did not go unnoticed. While some professors recognized his potential, others saw him as a troublemaker. His unwillingness to conform would soon have serious consequences. A love and a lifelong partner. Despite his struggles with professors, there was one bright spot in Einstein's life at the Polytechnic. Mileva Maric, a fellow student from Serbia. She was the only woman in their physics and mathematics program, an extraordinary achievement in an era when women were rarely admitted to such fields. Mileva was intelligent, ambitious, and independent. She and Albert quickly became close, bonding over their shared love for science. They spent hours discussing physics, exchanging ideas, and challenging each other's thinking. "Albert," she once said, "do you ever feel that our minds are traveling beyond what others can see?" "Every day," he replied with a smile. "But most people prefer to walk on the ground while we dream of flying." Their relationship deepened over time, but it was not without challenges. Albert's family, particularly his mother, disapproved of Mileva. Pauline Einstein believed that a woman like Mileva, who was not only highly educated but also from a different cultural background, was not suitable for her son. But Albert did not care for societal expectations. He had found someone who understood his mind, and that was all that mattered. Struggles to find a job. After graduating from the Polytechnic in 1900, Einstein expected to find a good position in academia. He had hoped to become a professor, where he could spend his life exploring the mysteries of the universe. But reality was far harsher than he had imagined. Unlike his classmates who secured jobs quickly, Einstein found himself unemployed. His refusal to follow traditional academic rules had cost him the support of his professors, and without recommendations, finding a position was nearly impossible. For 2 years, he struggled to make ends meet. He worked as a private tutor, teaching mathematics and physics to uninterested students. He sent application after application to universities and research institutions, but rejection after rejection followed. At times, he felt hopeless. He was filled with ideas, but without a proper job, he could not pursue his research seriously. He and Mileva, now deeply in love, dreamed of building a future together, but without financial stability, marriage was out of the question. The miracle of the patent office. Just when things seemed darkest, a lifeline appeared. In 1902, thanks to the help of a friend, Einstein secured a job at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern as a technical examiner. It was not the prestigious academic position he had hoped for, but it provided a stable income. At first, the work was dull, reviewing patent applications for electrical devices and inventions. But soon Einstein realized that the job had unexpected benefits. The work was not mentally exhausting, which meant he had time to think about physics. While others saw the patent office as just a bureaucratic institution, Einstein saw it as something else. A place where he could work in peace while secretly pursuing his passion for theoretical physics. He would finish his official work quickly and then spend hours lost in thought, scribbling equations on scraps of paper. His mind, as always, was filled with questions. What is light? How does it behave? What is time? As he reviewed inventions related to electromagnetism and energy, ideas began to form in his mind. Ideas that would soon lead to a scientific revolution. A secret revolution begins. By day, Einstein was an ordinary patent clerk, but by night, he was a physicist on a mission. He worked tirelessly, developing theories that challenged the very foundation of physics. One evening, as he sat in his small apartment in Bern, staring at the flickering candlelight, an old thought returned to him. What would it be like to ride on a beam of light? The question that had fascinated him since childhood refused to leave his mind. He knew that light traveled at an astonishing speed, 299,792,458 meters per second. But what would happen if someone moved alongside it? For months he wrestled with the problem, filling notebook after notebook with equations and ideas. And then a breakthrough came. He realized something that no one else had. The speed of light is constant, no matter how fast you move. This single idea, simple yet revolutionary, would form the foundation of what would later be called the special theory of relativity. But for now, Einstein was still just a patent clerk. No one knew that within his mind, the very laws of physics were being rewritten. Personal struggles and tragedy. While his scientific work was progressing, his personal life became more complicated. He and Mileva had a daughter, Liesl, in 1902. However, the details surrounding her fate remain a mystery. Some believe she died young, while others speculate she was given up for adoption. Whatever happened, it was a painful chapter in Einstein's life, one that he rarely spoke about. Despite this, Albert and Mileva married in 1903, determined to build a life together. They moved into a small apartment and Albert continued his work at the patent office while pursuing physics in secret. But financial difficulties persisted. Their life was far from comfortable, and the pressure of balancing work, family, and scientific research weighed heavily on Einstein. Yet, through all the struggles, he never stopped thinking. He knew he was on the verge of something great, something that would change the world. Conclusion: the calm before the storm. By 1904, Albert Einstein was still an unknown scientist, working in an office far removed from the great universities of Europe. To the world, he was just another government employee, reviewing patent applications day after day. But beneath the surface, something extraordinary was happening. A revolution was brewing, not one of politics or war, but of science. In the quiet of the Bern patent office, Albert Einstein was piecing together ideas that would soon shatter centuries of scientific understanding. The world had no idea what was coming. In just a few years, 1905 would arrive. Einstein's miracle year, when he would publish 4 groundbreaking papers that would change physics forever. But for now, he remained in the shadows, waiting for his moment to shine. The world was about to meet Albert Einstein, the genius who would redefine time and space. Chapter 4: The Miracle Year 1905, An Ordinary Man with Extraordinary Ideas. In the quiet city of Bern, Switzerland, Albert Einstein sat at his desk in the Swiss patent office, staring at a stack of papers. The year was 1905, and to the world, he was just a low-ranking technical examiner, evaluating patent applications for electric motors and mechanical devices. His co-workers saw him as a diligent but unremarkable employee. His superiors appreciated his efficiency, but never suspected that, behind his calm exterior, he was secretly conducting a scientific revolution. For years, Einstein had been working in the shadows, scribbling equations in his notebook during lunch breaks, thinking late into the night, and questioning the very nature of reality. But in 1905, everything would change. In the span of just a few months, Einstein published 4 groundbreaking scientific papers, each of which would reshape our understanding of the universe. It would later be called his Annus Mirabilis, the miracle year. The first breakthrough, the mystery of light. One of the greatest puzzles in physics at the time was the nature of light. For years, scientists had debated whether light was made of particles or waves. The famous physicist James Clerk Maxwell had developed equations that described light as an electromagnetic wave, and most scientists accepted this as fact. But something strange was happening in laboratories. When light was shined onto a metal surface, it caused electrons to be ejected. This was called the photoelectric effect. However, according to Maxwell's wave theory, the light's intensity, its brightness, should determine how much energy was transferred to the electrons. But experiments showed that it wasn't the intensity that mattered. It was the color, or frequency, of the light. This made no sense under the wave theory. Einstein, however, saw a way to solve the mystery. In March 1905, he published his first revolutionary paper on a heuristic point of view concerning the production and transformation of light. In it, he made a bold claim. Light is not just a wave, it is also made of tiny particles, which he called quanta, later known as photons. He proposed that each photon carried a specific amount of energy, depending on its frequency. When a photon struck a metal surface, it transferred its energy to an electron, causing it to be ejected. This simple but revolutionary idea explained the photoelectric effect perfectly. At first, many scientists dismissed Einstein's work. Even Max Planck, the father of quantum mechanics, was skeptical, but Einstein had provided the missing piece of the puzzle. Years later, in 1921, this discovery would earn him the Nobel Prize in Physics. The second paper, Atoms Are Real. For centuries, philosophers and scientists had debated whether atoms were real or just mathematical ideas. Some physicists, including Ernst Mach, believed that atoms were merely theoretical constructs with no real existence. But Einstein believed otherwise. In his second major paper, he analyzed a curious phenomenon called Brownian motion, the random movement of tiny particles suspended in a liquid. This motion had been observed decades earlier by the botanist Robert Brown, but no one understood why it happened. Einstein provided the answer. The particles were being jostled by invisible atoms and molecules in constant motion. His calculations showed exactly how the movement of these tiny particles could be used to measure the size of atoms themselves. For the first time, Einstein provided solid mathematical proof that atoms existed. This discovery was a turning point in physics and chemistry. It settled the debate once and for all. Atoms were not just theoretical, but real physical objects. The third paper, Special Relativity, a New Understanding of Time and Space. Since his teenage years, Einstein had been fascinated by the idea of riding alongside a beam of light. For years, he struggled with the contradictions between Newton's laws of motion and Maxwell's equations of electromagnetism. But in June 1905, he had a breakthrough. In his third paper, on the electrodynamics of moving bodies, Einstein introduced special relativity, a theory that shattered long-held beliefs about space and time. The key idea was the constancy of the speed of light. Einstein proposed two simple postulates. 1. The laws of physics are the same for all observers in uniform motion. 2. The speed of light is always the same, regardless of the motion of the observer or the source. These ideas had shocking consequences. Time slows down for objects moving close to the speed of light, time dilation. Lengths contract when moving at high speeds, length contraction. There is no absolute now. Time is relative to the observer. For the first time, Einstein showed that space and time were interconnected, forming a single fabric called space-time. This was one of the greatest scientific revolutions in history. The final paper, the most famous equation in the world. As if three groundbreaking discoveries were not enough, Einstein published one final paper in September 1905, in which he derived the most famous equation in physics. This simple equation revealed something profound. Mass and energy are interchangeable. It meant that even a tiny amount of mass contained an enormous amount of energy. This idea would later lead to nuclear power, and eventually the atomic bomb. At the time, Einstein had no idea how significant this discovery would become. He simply saw it as a fascinating consequence of special relativity. A revolution ignored. Despite the brilliance of his work, Einstein was still a nobody in the scientific world. His papers were published in Annalen der Physik, but they did not immediately receive much attention. Some scientists dismissed his ideas as too radical. Others simply did not understand them. Einstein had no prestigious university position, no laboratory, and no research grants. He was just a 26-year-old patent clerk with a mind ahead of his time. But that was about to change. A rising star. Slowly, physicists began to take notice of Einstein's work. Max Planck, one of the most respected scientists of the time, saw the potential in Einstein's ideas and began supporting him. Soon, invitations started arriving. Universities that had once ignored his job applications now wanted him on their faculty. In 1908, he finally left the patent office and became a professor. Within a few years, he would rise to international fame. Birth of a legend. 1905 was the year that changed everything. In just 12 months, a young, unknown scientist had rewritten the laws of physics and laid the foundation for modern science. His work on light quanta paved the way for quantum mechanics. His proof of atomic motion confirmed the existence of atoms. His special theory of relativity redefined space and time. His equation E equals mc Corwirstide revealed the connection between energy and mass. Albert Einstein was no longer just a patent clerk. He was now a scientist whose ideas would shape the future of humanity. And this was just the beginning. The world had yet to see his greatest work, the general theory of relativity, which would redefine gravity itself. But for now, the young genius had stepped out of the shadows and into history. Chapter 5. The Rise to Fame. A New World of Possibilities. A New Life in Prague. By the summer of 1911, Albert Einstein's life was beginning to change in ways he had never imagined. The papers he published in 1905 had catapulted him from an unknown patent examiner to one of the most talked-about names in the world of science. Still, despite his growing reputation, Einstein felt an unshakable discomfort. The academic world, which he had long dreamed of joining, now seemed restrictive and filled with unnecessary protocols. He had a reputation, but not yet the platform he craved to pursue his theoretical explorations. At the beginning of 1911, he received an invitation to a prestigious position in Prague, where he would become a professor at the German University of Prague. The offer was a significant step up from his current position at the University of Zurich, where he had taught for a few years after his remarkable rise in the scientific world. Prague was an exciting place, home to a thriving intellectual community and a city filled with deep cultural and scientific history. Yet, despite the charm of the city, Einstein was torn. He would be leaving behind the familiarity of Zurich, where he had begun his family and his reputation as a thinker. But the allure of a bigger stage and more resources to focus on his work was too strong to resist. In 1911, he moved with Mileva and their sons, Hans Albert and Eduard. Despite his growing fame, his personal life was not without challenges. He was increasingly isolated from his wife, Mileva, as their marriage began to falter. Their relationship, which had begun in the optimistic days of young love and intellectual camaraderie, was deteriorating under the weight of Einstein's professional success and his mounting personal frustrations. The growing fame of a genius. As Einstein settled into his new role in Prague, his fame as a scientist continued to soar. In Prague, Einstein became increasingly involved in public debates about the nature of space and time, the role of God in science, and the emerging theories that were changing the face of physics. He started publishing more regularly in scientific journals, and his fame reached beyond the academic community, drawing the attention of the broader public. One of the key themes of his work during this time was the general theory of relativity, which he had begun developing in the years following his special relativity theory. While special relativity had reshaped ideas about time and space, it was still not a comprehensive theory that explained gravity. For years, Einstein struggled to bring together his ideas about space and time with the gravitational laws formulated by Isaac Newton. In Prague, as his theories gained increasing acceptance, Einstein received invitations from all corners of Europe to give lectures on his work. These lectures were often attended by the most prominent scientists of the time. However, Einstein's outspoken nature and his resistance to conform to the academic norms sometimes created friction between him and his peers. As Einstein's fame grew, so did his influence in the scientific community. His theories began to dominate academic discussions, and Einstein was rapidly gaining a reputation as the most prominent physicist of his generation. However, while his public life blossomed, Einstein's personal life was beginning to show signs of strain, the strain of a crumbling marriage. Though Einstein and Mileva had once been deeply in love and intellectual equals, the pressures of fame and Einstein's relentless dedication to his work were starting to create irreparable cracks in their marriage. Mileva, who had supported Einstein throughout his early struggles, was becoming increasingly isolated from him. Mileva had not only been a partner in life, but also in science. Some have speculated that she contributed to his early work, including his 1905 papers. However, as Einstein's fame grew and his work became more widely recognized, Mileva began to feel neglected. Their relationship deteriorated further after their second son, Eduard, was born with a mental illness. Mileva, who had already faced challenges as a mother, now had to shoulder the burden of raising a child with special needs on her own. She was overwhelmed, and Einstein, who was consumed by his work, was unable to provide the emotional support she needed. By 1914, Einstein's marriage to Mileva was all but over. Their differences had become irreconcilable, and soon they separated. The personal loss was significant for Einstein, who now faced the isolation that had often plagued him throughout his life. The advent of World War I. As Einstein's personal life crumbled, the world around him was thrown into chaos. In 1914, World War I erupted, and Europe was plunged into a devastating conflict. Einstein, like many intellectuals, was deeply troubled by the war. He was an outspoken pacifist and criticized the war as a senseless bloodbath. His views on the conflict were controversial, especially in his native Germany, where militarism was widespread. Though he opposed the war, Einstein was increasingly caught in the crossfire of political tensions. His outspoken anti-war views made him unpopular with many of his fellow Germans, and his growing fame made him a target for criticism. Despite this, Einstein continued to speak out against the war, and was a vocal critic of Germany's militaristic leadership. As the war continued, Einstein's work was temporarily interrupted. The scientific community, much like the rest of the world, was in disarray. However, even amidst the turmoil, Einstein's intellectual curiosity remained undimmed. The general theory of relativity, a breakthrough by 1915, Albert Einstein was on the verge of completing one of the most important achievements in the history of science, his general theory of relativity. Unlike his special theory of relativity, which had focused on the nature of space and time, general relativity sought to explain the phenomenon of gravity. For years, Einstein had been working on the idea that gravity was not a force acting at a distance, as Newton had proposed, but rather a result of the curvature of space-time. He proposed that the presence of mass and energy caused space to curve, and this curvature affected the motion of objects. Essentially, he was suggesting that gravity was not an invisible force acting on objects, but the result of the warping of space and time itself. By late 1915, Einstein had completed the complex mathematical equations that described this theory, but he faced a dilemma: how to test his theory. At the time, there was no way to directly measure the bending of light or the curvature of space. The first real test of his theory would have to come through observation, and the opportunity would arise soon. In 1919, during a solar eclipse, a British astronomer named Arthur Eddington conducted an experiment to measure the bending of light around the sun. The results confirmed Einstein's predictions and provided the first experimental evidence for general relativity, a world transformed. The confirmation of Einstein's general theory of relativity was nothing short of revolutionary. Einstein became an international hero, celebrated not only in Europe but also around the world. His name was on the lips of nearly every intellectual, and his work became the foundation for the future of physics. The scientific community, which had once been skeptical of his ideas, now regarded him as one of the greatest minds to ever live. Einstein's rise to fame, however, was bittersweet. He had sacrificed so much for his work, and now, while the world celebrated his scientific accomplishments, his personal life was in turmoil. Despite his fame, Einstein was always haunted by a feeling of loneliness. He had never fully reconciled with the breakdown of his marriage to Mileva, and he struggled to maintain personal relationships in the face of his overwhelming intellectual pursuits. Nevertheless, the recognition of his work provided him with a platform to continue pushing the boundaries of science. Over the next decades, Einstein would go on to develop his ideas further, moving toward the unification of the forces of nature and continuing to reshape humanity's understanding of the universe. Conclusion: a legacy solidified. By the end of 1919, Albert Einstein was no longer just a theoretical physicist. He had become a cultural icon. His work had fundamentally changed the way humanity understood time, space, and gravity. The world looked to him as the ultimate authority in physics, and his contributions would influence generations of scientists to come. Though his personal struggles continued, Einstein's intellectual achievements stood as a beacon of human potential. In a world torn apart by war, Einstein had provided a vision of a universe that was more complex, more beautiful, and more awe-inspiring than anyone could have imagined. Albert Einstein's rise to fame was not just a personal triumph. It was a testament to the power of curiosity, imagination, and relentless determination. Chapter 6: A Time of Triumphs and Tragedies, the Struggle for Unity. By the 1920s, Albert Einstein had become one of the most famous scientists in the world. His work on relativity had revolutionized physics, and he won the 1921 Nobel Prize for his research on the photoelectric effect. However, as his scientific achievements grew, so did the challenges in his personal and political life. Escaping Nazi Germany. Einstein, a pacifist and a Jewish scientist, became a target for rising anti-Semitic movements in Germany. By 1933, when the Nazis took power, his home was raided and his life was in danger. He fled to the United States, accepting a position at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. The atomic bomb and regret. As World War II loomed, Einstein reluctantly signed a letter to President Roosevelt, warning that Nazi Germany might develop a nuclear bomb. This letter led to the Manhattan Project, but Einstein did not work on it directly. When the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, Einstein was heartbroken. His scientific principles had been used for mass destruction. The fight for peace. Determined to prevent further nuclear war, Einstein spent his final years advocating for disarmament and world unity. He co-founded the Emergency Committee of Atomic Scientists and signed the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, urging nations to avoid nuclear catastrophe. Einstein passed away in 1955, leaving behind a world transformed by his discoveries. Though he had witnessed both the power and peril of science, his lifelong pursuit of knowledge and peace continues to inspire generations. The American Years, a new horizon of ideas and challenges. In 1933, Albert Einstein arrived in the United States, leaving behind a Germany that had fallen under Nazi rule. Settling at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, he found peace to continue his work, but the world around him was far from stable. A scientist in a troubled world. While Einstein remained deeply involved in theoretical physics, his concerns extended beyond science. He spoke out against fascism, racism, and war, supporting civil rights and warning against nuclear weapons. However, his outspoken nature made him a subject of government suspicion during the Cold War, and the FBI kept a file on him, suspecting communist ties. The nuclear dilemma. Although he had urged President Roosevelt to consider nuclear research before World War II, Einstein was horrified when the atomic bomb was used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He regretted his indirect role in its development and spent his later years advocating for global peace and nuclear disarmament. The final years. Despite the political pressures, Einstein remained devoted to science and philosophy. He continued working on a unified field theory, seeking a deeper understanding of the universe. Though he never completed this work, his ideas laid the foundation for future discoveries. Einstein passed away in 1955, leaving behind not just groundbreaking theories, but a legacy of wisdom, curiosity, and a vision for a more peaceful world. Chapter 8, The Final Years. Reflection, Regret. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, Albert Einstein had become more than just a scientist. He was a global icon. Though he had changed the world with his discoveries, his later years were marked by deep reflection, personal regrets, and an unshaken commitment to peace and knowledge. His inability to complete this theory was a rare scientific disappointment, but he accepted it with humility. "The important thing is not to stop questioning," he often said, reminding others that curiosity was the key to discovery. Regrets and reflections. Einstein's mind was not only focused on physics, he also reflected deeply on the impact of his actions. One of his greatest regrets was his letter to President Roosevelt in 1939, which had warned of the possibility of Nazi Germany building an atomic bomb. Though well-intended, it led to the Manhattan Project and ultimately the nuclear devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. After the war, he became an outspoken critic of nuclear weapons, advocating for global disarmament and urging world leaders to prevent further destruction. He co-founded the Emergency Committee of Atomic Scientists, using his influence to warn about the dangers of a nuclear arms race. A voice for justice. Despite being a celebrated scientist, Einstein never ignored social issues. Living in the United States, he saw racial discrimination and spoke openly against it. He was a strong supporter of civil rights, befriending activists like Paul Robeson and W.E.B. Du Bois. He believed that the fight against racism was just as important as the fight for scientific progress. The last days. In 1955, Einstein's health began to decline. He continued working, scribbling equations in his notebook even from his hospital bed. On April 17, 1955, he suffered an aortic aneurysm. When doctors suggested surgery, he refused, saying, "I want to go when I want. It is tasteless to prolong life artificially." On the morning of April 18, 1955, Albert Einstein passed away at the age of 76. His final words, spoken in German, were lost forever, as the attending nurse did not understand the language. A legacy beyond time. Einstein's death marked the end of an era, but his influence never faded. His theories still shape modern physics, his ideas on peace and justice continue to inspire, and his spirit of curiosity lives on in every scientist who dares to question the unknown. Though he left the world physically, his legacy remains, a reminder that knowledge, wisdom, and a quest for truth are the greatest gifts one can leave behind. Chapter 9. The Legacy of Einstein, Influence Beyond Physics. Albert Einstein's passing in 1955 did not mark the end of his impact. Rather, it signaled the beginning of his enduring legacy. Though best known for his groundbreaking contributions to physics, Einstein's influence extended far beyond science, into philosophy, politics, and humanity's very way of thinking. Revolutionizing science. Einstein's theories reshaped the understanding of space, time, and energy. His theory of relativity led to innovations in GPS technology, black hole research, and quantum mechanics. Scientists continue to build on his ideas, proving that his work was not just theoretical but a foundation for the future. A voice for peace and justice. Beyond science, Einstein was a moral thinker. He opposed nuclear weapons, warning of their catastrophic potential. He was also a strong advocate for civil rights, speaking against racism and segregation in America. His words, "The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing," continue to inspire activists worldwide. An eternal symbol of genius. Today, Einstein's name is synonymous with intelligence and curiosity. His famous equation, E=mc², is recognized even by those who know little about physics. His wild hair and deep eyes remain an iconic image of a mind dedicated to knowledge. Decades after his death, Einstein's legacy endures, not just in equations and discoveries, but in the idea that one person's curiosity can change the world. Chapter 10: The Eternal Relevance. Einstein's ideas in the modern world. Albert Einstein's theories and ideas continue to resonate deeply in the modern world, shaping not just physics, but the way humanity perceives the universe, technology, and even morality. Nearly 7 decades after his death, his legacy is as relevant as ever, providing insights into everything from space exploration to ethical dilemmas in today's society. Einstein's legacy in modern physics. Einstein's groundbreaking theory of relativity still forms the backbone of modern physics, impacting fields such as cosmology and quantum mechanics. His work helped lay the foundation for the study of black holes, the Big Bang, and the ongoing search for a unified theory of everything. In the 21st century, scientists continue to build on his ideas, expanding the boundaries of knowledge he once set. Einstein's famous equation, E=mc², remains at the core of energy research and nuclear physics. It is a reminder that energy and mass are interchangeable, a concept that has revolutionized how we understand the cosmos. Today, researchers are still using his principles to explore the mysteries of dark energy, gravitational waves, and the fabric of the universe itself. Technological advancements and innovation. Einstein's ideas aren't confined to theoretical realms. They have practical applications that affect our daily lives. The Global Positioning System, GPS, which billions of people use worldwide, relies on Einstein's theories of relativity. Without his insight into how time and space are warped by gravity, the technology would be far less accurate. Moreover, advancements in quantum computing and artificial intelligence owe much to the conceptual groundwork laid by Einstein and other early 20th century physicists. While he didn't work directly in these fields, his ideas opened the door for technological leaps that we are just beginning to understand. Ethics and global responsibility. Einstein's ethical philosophy, particularly his calls for global peace, nuclear disarmament, and social justice, are increasingly significant in today's politically polarized world. As the threat of nuclear war still looms and the challenges of climate change grow ever more urgent, his warnings about humanity's destructive potential resonate louder than ever. In his later years, Einstein became a vocal advocate for human rights, urging nations to act responsibly toward one another. In today's age, with social media platforms and global interconnectedness, his advocacy for peace, tolerance, and humanitarian efforts feels increasingly vital. His view that science and ethics must work hand in hand is a guiding principle for those who use technology to solve the world's greatest problems. A mind that continues to... Einstein's legacy is not just in the formulae and equations he left behind, but in his enduring message of curiosity, humility, and compassion. He once said, "The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing." In the age of rapid technological change, his insistence on asking questions, thinking critically, and seeking understanding remains a guiding principle for future generations. His example continues to inspire scientists, thinkers, and dreamers around the world to challenge the status quo, imagine the impossible, and push the boundaries of human potential. In this way, Einstein's ideas remain eternally relevant, as vital today as when they were first conceived. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this story about Einstein's incredible journey and legacy as inspiring as I did. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any future stories. Leave a comment below sharing what part of Einstein's legacy resonated with you the most. Until next time, keep learning and stay curious.